When I first started as a young program development officer working at the local NGO, a constant question that came to mind was, how can we, as non-Indigenous peoples, support the communities better? And after working in at least 40 villages, land grab has made it so difficult and sometimes impossible for any sort of program implementation to be done successfully. And this experience has deeply impacted me as a person. With that, I am determined to understand Orang Asli's land rights, as well as other stakeholders' interests in the land that the Orang Asli inhabits. But today's talk is definitely not about me. The reason why I'm here is to share with you that we cannot speak about empowerment if the only aid intervention that we provide is actually the basic needs necessities. Now, what the community truly needs and have been fighting for is actually land recognition. Land recognition isn't just about territory. Land recognition is about protecting the Orang Asli's way of life, supporting their indigenous systems protocols, and as well as honoring their belief systems. I would like to invite all of you here today to examine what does the concept of development truly means, and what does development means for each and every one of us. Now, forests are, in many parts of the world, forests are primarily seen through a capitalist lens. That is, forests as commodities or forests as resources rather than elements of conservation. Now, in year 2012, a government has produced a statistic that 80% of Orang Asli communal land has yet to be gazetted or protected. 80%. And however, activists have argued that actually this figure is way much higher, simply because unrecognized territories, including unrecognized villages known as Kampung Tambahan, is not included in this figure. I quote Dr. Lim Tak Win, a geographer, and he says, and I paraphrase, "The only permanent status of the Orang Asli's land is in its state of impermanence." And what does that mean? It means that even when the Orang Asli customary land status has been gazetted, this status can be reversed at any time. In fact, Monga Bay, a highly regarded international watchdog, had observed that Malaysia has the highest deforestation rate in years 2000 and 2012. Now, let us just sink in with that fact for a moment. It is also worth to note that all communal state land that has yet to be gazetted are automatically assumed as state's land. Now, we have two conflicting perspectives in how forests are viewed. So for the other stakeholders, including including the state, forests are seen as influence, a form of power, income, resources, and many more. But for the Orang Asli communities, forests are intergenerational inheritance that forms meaningful placemaking identity for the community. And it also holds many sacred sites, including cemeteries, places of worship, and so on. Forests are also a form of property and a very important form of livelihood for the community. It is important to note that other stakeholders do not recognize or acknowledge Orang Asli's centuries roles in managing and cultivating the fruit forest. So to simplify, this can be divided into two conflicting philosophy. One is that of the human at the apex, governing and manipulating the other, while the other is that of the human being at the center and as part of the environment. I like to quote what Burnett says as, "What we call as natural is actually the cultural determinant determination of nature. In this talk, I will present with you 5 main pillars that describes about the Temuan's lived experiences in how they view their built environments. Now, the 2 Temuan collaborators are from the Hulu Selangor, but other Orang Asli communities are also part of this project. And the reason why I include them is because I wanted to understand a bigger understanding of Orang Asli's agroforestry. Agroforestry simply means a kind of agriculture that integrates trees and shrubs. But I need to be very careful not to homogenize their experiences, because the truth of the matter is that every single community has their own way of doing agroforestry. But what am I about to share with you today is that these are all have been consented by the communities. Now, the Orang Asli that I'm referring to are also being defined as the indigenous people of Peninsular Malaysia, not including the Sabah and Sarawak peoples. And Orang Asli are divided into 3 categories, meaning the Semang, Senoi, and Proto-Malays. The Temuans are a subset of the Proto-Malay category. Now, I would like to invite all of you to take a look at this image and tell me, what do you notice? Trees? Yes? Nature? What if I tell you that the tree in the middle is actually a durian tree? But why bother learning about durian tree? Why? What's so interesting? But what if I tell you that durian trees are one of the only fruit trees in the forest that could live up to 100 years? In fact, the Orang Asli have said that the trees that are under their care could live up to 300 years. And what's really cool about this is that in the project, we have managed to trace up to 7 generations in managing these forest fruit patches. So why is this important again? All of you have just proved it. You said that it's nature, it's trees, but actually, this is the work of care by the Orang Asli communities. So, in the journey towards land recognition, I would like to highlight and hope that instead of looking at who planted those trees, we should look at the work of care that is being done by the Orang Asli. Now, by positioning ourselves in relation to the environment, the Temuan reveals that different worldviews shapes different ways of seeing. And different ways of seeing shapes different ways of living. So on your right is a modernist picture featuring built skyscrapers and obviously man-made. But on your left is actually a Temia community house. Temia is also another group of Orang Asli. And you can see that the houses blend seamlessly with the environment. And without a trained eye, one would not be able to discern that those beautiful trees at the hills are actually Orang Asli fruit agroforestry. So instead of looking at this picture through a civilized versus uncivilized lens, I would like to think of it as one that is working with nature and one is working against nature. Now, these philosophical differences is also translated into their language. When we think about primary forests versus secondary forests, we tend to think about the biological composition between these 2 distinct spaces. But for the Orang Asli, there is an added element, and that is the presence of the superhuman beings. And essentially, the Temuan generally believes in 2 kinds of superhuman beings. The first is through the manifestation of their ancestral spirits that lives mobile within the forest. And the second are situated superhuman beings, or penunggu, if you heard about it, that lives situately within topographical spaces such as boulders, rivers, trees, and so forth. I must emphasize that contrary to popular textbooks, Orang Asli do not worship superhuman beings. In fact, They communicate simply because superhuman beings, like animals, also have existence, have their own existence in the nature. And the other thing is that I must also emphasize that the Temuan traditionally do not condone black magic or pemujaan. And this is also translated into their material culture. For the Orang Asli, durians, okay, how many of you here likes musang king? Yeah, durian lovers? Okay, to them, it doesn't mean anything to them because these are durians cultivated in plantations. It holds absolutely no meaning to them except that it's a commodity crop, right? But for the Temuans, durian saka and durian bukit that are found in the forests hold special meaning to them. Well, the first is because it's intergenerational. It's inherited from one generation to another. Second, it holds a sense of belonging. And the third is actually is the Temuan's cultural marker. And they also hold an event called the Raya Buah. In Malaysian terms, it's a makan-makan event. So it's a commensality event where people are being invited to come and taste the fruit together. But what's also interesting is that they believe that the superhumans, this is a time for them to give thanks to the superhumans for bringing lots of fruits. And if they didn't get a really good season, they will ask the superhuman for better season next time. Now, how many of you here likes rendang? Malaysians that don't like rendang? Seriously? Well, I know I do. I love rendang. And anyone who loves rendang would know that every single family, Malay family, has their own recipe to it. For the Orang Asli communities, it's the same, except that the recipe is in their agroforestry systems, the way of managing the land. So, and of course, fruit trees are so important to the community that it is also reflected in their oral tradition. Now, in one Temuan Genesis story, it begins with, there was only soil. And I can't read the rest, so you gotta do it yourself. And this story is narrated by Nenek Bongsu, which I am highly appreciative of. And the other oral history is through their Moyang Harimau. Moyang Harimau is actually the ancestral tiger spirit. And what's interesting here is that the Temuan believes that Moyang Harimau imbues vitality into the soil. So what does that mean? Is that when there is conflict among community members, Temuan believe that the Moyang Harimau will not imbue vitality into the soil, which results in lesser food production. So this shows how intricate the relationship of Orang Asli and other worldlings in maintaining balance and harmony. Of course, their knowledge, the traditional ecology knowledge is demonstrated as well. And in this map that I have conducted with a Temuan collaborator, he had actually named 28 durian trees with 28 durian names. And these names are being transplanted into this figure. Some of the interesting names here are like durian gejaing, durian musang dog, so on and so forth. Of course, we need to talk about their agroforestry, right? So, on your left, is a picture of a durian plantation in Johor. And you can see that the soil is completely orange, right? It's because the trees has been cleared before plantation can begin. But on your right is actually an agroforestry system by the Orang Asli community. And you can see that the durian is positioned with other life matters. And other life matters also thrive together with the durian. And importantly, this forest litter and tree cover provides moisture to the ground and the soil. So for the Orang Asli community, they could easily insert a tree sapling into the ground in the forest. And this cannot be done with durian plantation method, which is why they have to inject a lot of chemical intervention to recreate conditions like in the forest. So, and I also appreciate their ways of watering system and topography, You could see that bamboos are being planted on top of the durian trees, slowly releasing moisture to the ground so that in the daytime, the durians can absorb all of this moisture and water. The agroforestry ethical harvesting system truly inspires me because the community stopped collecting durians, about 20 to 25% durian availability before it finishes, because they also want to share their harvest with the non-human others like squirrels, animals, and so on and so forth. So this shows that the mentality is that, the built system is not just for the community. With that, I like to end my talk with 3 main points. The first is that Orang Asli's distinct worldviews and deep-rooted connection to the land is an alternate version of their own development. The second is that Orang Asli's relationship with nature also brings lasting benefits to the broader community, to you, to me, and not just for Orang Asli. And the third is that when we start looking at indigenous peoples as collaborators, we might find that we would learn more from them than they would learn from us. And the final of the final is that when we care for Orang Asli's durian, we are caring for all of us. Thank you.